Hello, dear listeners. If you're new here, we're Margin Mavens, and we are obsessed with writing in our books and sharing our thoughts with you guys. In this episode, we are talking about The House of Hades by Rick Riordan, the fourth book in the Heroes of Olympus series. After that terrible, heart-wrenching cliffhanger that was the ending of Mark of Athena, we have a lot to discuss.
We do have a lot to discuss, but we also don't have a lot of time to do it in. So, Cliff Notes version, all right? Percy Annabeth in Tartarus, going to the doors of death. Everybody else, not in Tartarus, going to the doors of death. However, they might as well be in Tartarus because they keep hitting every possible roadblock that they can.
Yeah.
Every single one. There is no rest for the good guys. There's no rest
the wicked, really.
for the wicked either.
Oof.
I mean, they have to go around. Hecate forgot that she was in this series at all.
Same.
Which was wild because we finished Wrath of the Triple Goddess and I was like, oh my god, that's right. Like, this is not the first time that they've ever...
But it's so funny to see the different versions of her because she's so different in Wrath of the Triple Goddess.
Mm-hmm. She's a lot less chill in Wrath of the Triple Goddess, I feel like.
Yeah, she's a scary one.
So, for context, Hecate comes into play when Hazel is kind of looking for some guidance. And there's this giant storm, and Arian shows up, and the horse, and he's like, come on, let's go into the storm. And Leo and Jason are like,
immediately takes her and leaves.
Yeah, like, whoa, no, you're not going to the storm. And Hazel's like, it'll be fine. Goes into the storm, horse dips.
Yeah, and then Hazel, my job was getting you here.
Yeah, done. Hazel has a nice conversation with Hecate, and like, she discovers she's got to use magic.
Yeah, which she's not known for that.
No, she's not known for that at all. She's pretty badass. She's a badass.
Love her.
But not with magic.
Yeah, we find out that this whole mission really relies on her ability to manipulate the mist. And she's like, guys.
I don't know how to do that.
Never done that. Nope. Wrong lady.
I'm not the one.
Okay, what we're all really here for is we finally... And Rick does things so purposefully that really it's on site, right? He doesn't immediately give us a Percy or Annabeth POV.
No.
He waits a couple chapters.
Yeah. And why soothe our anxieties, right? Why do that when you can just keep us on the edge of our seat a little bit longer?
So they're plummeting for a while.
It's like Alice in Wonderland, y'all.
Yeah. They're plummeting for a while, and the fact that he keeps like pulling her towards him, because both of them are pretty, like, he spoke a big game to Nico, like, hey, meet us at the doors of death, right? But in those moments, like, he doesn't really know if they're going to survive or hit the ground and not be pancakes, right? So throughout this falling, they're really just pulling each other closer. Then they get closer to their destination, right? And there's a ground. And Annabeth is like, Percy, water, let's do the thing. And at first, I forgot that it wasn't the river Styx, right? And so I was like, oh my god, did he just control the river Styx? And then we find out that it's actually Cocytus, which is the river of lamentation, which is terrible for them to land in when you first get into Tartarus, because it's all like, hey, everything sucks, we're gonna die here.
Yeah.
One of the things I love about Percy is his situation of his compartmentalizing is so strong, right? That he is like, this place sucks, we might die, but we have to, not just for us, for everybody we love, right? Is his like driving mantra.
Yes.
There's never a point in, I think, the entire series where he's surviving for the sake of him. Like, he's always like, I need to survive to help my friends. I need to survive because if I'm gone, who's going to get Annabeth? Like,
yeah.
Especially throughout Tartarus. He's like, if I die here, right, Annabeth is by herself. And he's like, I cannot allow that. And very quickly they realize, because they see drag marks, that Arachne the Terrible has survived.
Yep.
And this kind of is in the back of their mind. And then at some point, right, Arachne goes to attack Annabeth. No words. It was on site for her. And Percy doesn't hesitate, kills her immediately, right? Mm-hmm. This is our first glimpse of AO3's Dark Percy. And I love Dark Percy.
Pump the brakes. Did you just say AO3's version of Dark Percy?
Yes. Search up Dark Percy. There's really fun fics
this
over there.
This is canon Dark Percy. Let's not get it twisted. This is canon.
Yeah, but this is what introduces AO3's Dark Percy. You know, like
he gets real dark.
He gets
at one point.
Blame him.
He gets so dark that Annabeth is terrified of him.
Yeah. And so
which is how we ended up with morally gray dark romances.
Yep. This is the blueprint. And so a lot is happening, right? So the entire book, because here's the thing, right? This isn't like a little adventure that they go on. They are in Tartarus for basically the entire book.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to flip back and forth between what they've got going on and what they've got going on above ground and everything. What I really love is there's a scene above ground where Leo and Jason are chasing down these like little mischievous thieves.
These little, sticky fingered.
And what I love about them is the fact that Leo has to do all of this like really intense mechanical things to like get to their tower and get in and stuff like that. And he defeats them, like he tricks them and whatever. Right. And Jason just kind of shows up. Right. He
like the coolest way possible. Yeah. And Leo's like, bro, that was wasted on me. Appreciate it, but wasted on me. Thank you.
And what I really loved is Jason is really cool in this book. Like, he does a lot of really cool things.
Jason has figured it out. Jason has figured out who and what he is, and he's just embracing it. He's done trying to second guess himself. Mm-hmm. He's done trying to, like, reimagine who he is post, memory loss and discovering Camp Half-Blood and finding Piper. He's like, no, Camp Half-Blood and Piper are my future. Piper is my future. Mm-hmm. That is the end goal.
And so when they first get introduced to these, like, I think they're called dwarves, right? What I find really funny is the dwarves are more than willing to like banter with them. And Leo gets kind of fed up and he like lights his hand on fire. And Jason's like, oh, heck yeah, I'm down for this. And he's getting ready to like electrify them.
Yeah.
And we find out that they've got stuff. And this is why Hecate was leading them towards them and all of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Fast forward, right? Back in Tartarus.
Yeah.
Percy and Annabeth are not doing great.
No.
Right? As one would expect.
It's hot down there.
It's hot down there. They're dying. And Percy has a moment where he considers calling in Miss O'Leary. And he's like, no, because what if I call her in here and she like reverts back to her hellhound form? He specifically says like he couldn't do that to his dog.
Yeah.
Right? And I love Percy so much. Because of those little moments. Like, he does a lot of really cool, grand things throughout this series, but it's the little things that shows how much
he is as a person. Yeah.
And we even get this in, like, the Triple Goddess, right? Mm-hmm. Is when he has that moment with Miss O'Leary, and she leaves, and he's like,
he misses her.
I love my dog.
Yeah.
But she's her own thing, like, I'll see her eventually when we end up over there with her. We get a mythomagic reference, which I really loved, because
bringing it back
brings us all the way back to Nico's beginning when he was just a nerdy little kid.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, it was actually in the expansion pack. And Leo's like, oh, you would have the expansion pack.
Was it Leo or was it Frank?
One of them.
One of them.
I really enjoyed a lot of the growth that happens with them as a team above ground.
Mm-hmm.
But dipping into Percy, one of my favorite scenes of this book is when they are fighting those like Array, the curse people.
Mm-hmm.
Because what ends up happening is every single time you defeat one of these guys, once you kill them, they place upon you a curse that was placed upon you by somebody you have already killed. Mm-hmm. And don't know if you guys have been following along, but Percy and Annabeth have killed a lot of monsters.
Yeah, Percy especially.
So this is a really bad fight for him because every single time he defeats one of them because he's trying to save Annabeth, because she gets really specific and terrible curses, right? At one point, she is blinded.
Because she was nobody.
Defeating one of the giants. or the Cyclops. And then she's got another one where this one was the heartbreaking one, is when she gets the curse that said that Percy abandoned her.
Yeah.
And he's like, who could have done that one? And the curses were like, oh, someone innocent that you abandoned. And Percy has that moment of like, she wouldn't have cursed me, you know? And he's talking about Calypso, right? And it was so bittersweet because there was a part of Percy that did care about her
Mm-hmm.
and want what was best. But if Percy is so ADHD, right? That out of sight, out of mind. Like he cared about her a lot, wanted to help her in those moments,
Mm-hmm.
right? But the moment he got out of that island, it's not that he
Mm-hmm.
forgot about her, but there were Titans attacking. And his life happens very fast after that. And so he has that moment of just like unfiltered hurt of like, she wouldn't curse me, but the curse isn't on him. The curse is on Annabeth because Calypso probably has that moment of like, man, like,
If it wasn't for Annabeth,
yeah.
maybe he would
And
have stayed.
we get the like foreshadowing of Calypso, right? We get that reminder that she existed.
Yeah.
And so Percy once again has this whole thing of I need to get past this because of Annabeth. And then we get Bob.
Which I don't remember Bob at all.
Oh,
Which feels appropriate.
I love Bob.
I love Bob too.
And so Bob was a Titan that Percy defeats by getting him into the River of Lethe, and makes him lose his memories and basically says like, hey, you're Bob, you're a good guy, and drops him off at Hades's palace, who then treats him like a janitor, right? And once again, Percy has that ADHD-ness where it's out of sight, out of mind. You know, he really lays into himself about this aspect of him because it's once again the problem of out of sight, out of mind. If it's out of sight, out of mind, he's also not going to think about it. You know, he deals with a lot of his own mistakes in this book because he's very aware of like, oh, like I put Bob in the situation, then I never even thought twice about him. And so Bob comes in and saves them. And he kind of becomes their like tour guide as they're going through Tartarus and dealing with everything that is going on. Right? Then we get back to the above ground.
Yeah.
And Nico and Jason are dealing with Cupid. And some things start making a lot of sense. Because the guy that is working with Cupid tells Nico, like, hey, you are still not willing to talk about this. And Nico's like, I have nothing to talk about. And he goes, the one you love is falling through Tartarus. And you have nothing to say, like you still won't admit it. And Jason and everybody else,
Assumes it's
including probably
Annabeth.
the readers at this point, because I know I was like, oh, it's because he loves Annabeth. And so we get some foreshadowing there. And one thing that I wrote down in this one is that this series, once again, has me really annoyed for Percy and the fact that he has to do everything he does in the Letters of Recommendation series that is coming out currently.
Yeah.
Right? Because I was already annoyed for him of the fact that he even had to do these things. Right? But reading through it and reliving it once again with him, I was like, guys,
what else does he have to do to make y'all
he
happy?
like went through Tartarus and you're saying he needs to do these like dumb little errand boy quests for okay. I really trauma blocked how painful Tartarus was.
I think we all did.
And Rick does not make it easy to read, right? There are a lot of moments where Annabeth and Percy are like, the only reason we're getting through this is because we like squeeze each other's hands. We like lean on each other.
Yeah.
And it really paints that picture between how they're getting through Tartarus and how Nico had to get through Tartarus by himself. Once again, what did this little boy do to Rick?
Ever do? Yeah. It's on site. It's on site with Rick at this point. For so many reasons.
We go back above ground, right? And Keone shows up with her brothers. And they are super annoying, as usual. And they go through a fight with Piper and everything, and they've got this sphere that kind of reminded me of the wind that Hermes gives them in, I think, Sea of Monsters. And it's supposed to blow them completely off track. Piper ends up like misdirecting it so it doesn't go as far as it could have and stuff like that. But Leo gets sent all the way to Calypso's island. And I love the
My
fact
favorite scene. It's my
that
favorite.
she is so upset about it.
She's so mad. She's yelling at Zeus, and Leo's just staring at her, wondering what he could have possibly done to make her this upset.
And so for those who forget, Calypso has a curse that every once in a while a hero will wash up on her shores. She is cursed to fall in love with them, and they are cursed to always leave her. And so that is kind of her penance, because she was daughter of Atlas. Gods don't handle conflict well, and all of these things. And so when Leo shows up, first off, she's like, there's no way I'm going to fall for this guy. He's scrawny. He's covered in dirt. Like,
he's
she's
nasty.
Like, she's like, I'm really insulted right now. Not only because this curse exists and you're supposed to have already gotten me out of this,
but this is because who you send me.
Yeah. And Leo's
for
like, right,
also,
ma'am.
For further context, just another reminder, right? The last person that we know of to land on Calypso's island is Percy. Okay? So just listen, I love Leo, ride or die for Leo, but you can't go from, you're going from Percy to Leo Valdez. Like, I understand Calypso's
she was upset because there's a lot of things that happened to her, right? She was already knowing that was how the curse was going to play out. But two, by this point, she was like, Percy said he was going to get the gods to release me, right? And so for her to not have been released and then also get Leo, a lot was happening, right? And so they both have very, like, this is my side of the island and that is your side of the island conversation.
It's very not enemies to lovers, not even rivals to lovers.
Mad for the sake of being mad. Like, he's like, I don't know why she hates me. They're just
frustrated. Leo's frustrated because he's not with his friends, and his friends need him, or his ship. More importantly, he has lost Festus again. Okay, because as a child of Hephaestus, this is where his brain goes, right? And then, it's really cute watching how it all sort of unfolds, because he can't not just sit back and relax. He has to stay busy. Like, part of that is being a child of Hephaestus, and part of that is being a demigod. Like, he has to, he's always fidgeting, right?
So he starts tinkering.
He starts fixing things on the island.
He starts just being a little handyman. And she's like, why are you fixing my stuff? And he goes, I don't handle it. It was
broken. I don't like it when things are broken.
And she's like, okay, but my curtains? He was like, it wasn't level.
Yeah.
And they have this like begrudging admiration kind of happening for the both of them. He's doing these things despite being pissed at her. She's allowing her like servants to send him food and makes him clothes and
like flame-proof, fire-proof clothing.
And they do all of these things for each other, and then finally they start being a team.
Yes.
Because he's like, I love the fact that she's not against getting dirty, right? Like, she's gardening, she's able to do these things. And so finally they start kind of talking to each other, and she figures out what's going on, right? And he says, like, I need to see, like, he says something, and she's like, oh, is that your Annabeth, your Elizabeth, your, whatever? Because she's already falling for him, and she's upset because she's being reminded, like, there's going to be someone else. And he's like, no. Nothing like that.
No.
And as things are progressing, they start building or figuring out how to build his ship, because he's like, I'm going to get off this island.
Yeah.
And a magical raft shows up.
And she gets so upset.
And but immediately she's also is going to put the navigation. Yeah. And he has that moment of realization of like, the raft would only show up if you liked me. And she was like, shut your mouth.
Yeah, we're not talking about it. Yeah.
And she ends up kissing him, which queen of mixed signals. And he is really smart because he remembers that he had found a astrolabe from Odysseus. which Odysseus was one of her like flames, and he was
It
like,
was
it was missing a crystal.
according to
So
the dwarves.
yeah,
It was missing
and
a crystal.
so he asked for a crystal from her thing. So we know, regardless of how the rest of the series plans out, we know that he is going to find a way to get her off of this island because it's Leo Valdez and yada yada. And so he
Speaking
finally
of
manages to
the blue,
leave.
by the way.
Yeah, he's cool. I like him. But once again, for me, right?
Yeah,
You
for
said it
you, it's
yourself.
Percy. It's fine.
You
Yeah,
got Percy first. Like,
yeah. No,
and
recognized, but also like
game recognizes game. Like, I get it. And so he figures out that he needs to go, right? Back on the ship, Hazel, I believe it is, finds out that Coach Hedge is going to have a kid.
Frank.
And no, one of the girls finds out first. Frank has the conversation with Coach Hedge, but one of the girls
that's right.
hears
Yes,
him.
hears him talking to Melly. Correct. Yes.
I think it's Hazel.
No, I'm pretty sure it's Hazel. Piper suspects, but I think it's Hazel that finds out for sure.
One of the girls. Listen, guys, there's a lot of characters, and they change POVs very fast. So we find out that Coach Hedge is going to have a kid, and that he also got married before they went on this journey. And it really adds a lot of perspective, because knowing that he was a newlywed, knowing that he had, this life at home, right? He was still willing to go on this trip. And risk his life, and
but also the big piece is that she's at Camp Half-Blood.
Yeah.
And they chose Camp Half-Blood because they thought that she would be safest there.
Yeah.
And now she's not, because as we all know, the Romans are marching. They're having some troubles. Shout out to Leo for having the foresight to get the dwarves involved there.
It was really good.
They're on their way to Camp Half-Blood.
Other things are happening with the Romans as well, right? So Annabeth finds out, because there's an altar in Tartarus, she finds out that she can probably send a message back to Camp Half-Blood. And so she sends a message and is hoping to get it to Rachel, which is, remember, their oracle. And basically saying, like, hey, we have this statue. You need to tell Reyna about the statue. So hopefully there can be some sort of ceasefire on this.
Right.
And they have a really cool scene. Rachel does not get a lot of cool scenes, right?
Rachel, I will die on the hill that Rachel Dare is one of the best characters Rick has ever written.
She doesn't get a lot of cool scenes, right? Because she gets introduced as this kind of like wrench in the Annabeth and Percy plot line, right? And she becomes so much more. She becomes an Oracle of Delphi. Like, she does all these things, right? And Octavian is like, why am I going to listen to you? And she was like, even, your father, or even, someone in your line recognized and respected, the Oracle of Delphi and whatever. And she ends up being like possessed for a second, shows
the green
that she is, right?
Yeah,
it was super cool. And so Reyna decides she's going to listen to Annabeth, right? Because Reyna, at the end of the day, is upset that they fired on the Romans. She's got that pride in her, right? But she knows that Annabeth wouldn't be. Yeah, she knows that Annabeth wouldn't be trying to steer her off course just for the sake of steering her off course,
right?
Because she also knows that Annabeth knows her. Like, she knows, like, she's not going to stop for any trivial thing. And so she tells Octavian point blank, do not go to Camp Half-Blood until I am back. If they attack, do your thing, right? But do not go. Literally 2 seconds after she leaves, he's like, plans changed.
Let's go.
And
I Octavian so much.
It's fine. It's fine.
It's not fine, but
she rushes off. Yep. She rushes off with her horse, her Pegasus.
Her Pegasus.
And goes off to Rome, hoping that she can catch up with them and stuff like that. And she actually is kind of funny, because she says, like, I'm going to meet Jason where I know he would go. And Jason had no plans of going to this place until he remembered this promise, right? And he has a moment in his own monologue of feeling really bad, because he knows that he didn't lead Reyna on, but he didn't stop her either. Correct. Like, he let her believe that there was going to be more for them. Yes. Which I 100% believe, if his life hadn't been literally plucked out of Rome and into Camp Half-Blood, it would have just ended up happening for
the sake of convenience at this point. Like,
and And so she ends up going off, right? They get to the House of Hades,
Mhm.
right? And they are immediately not doing great because in the House of Hades is the doors of death. And every 12 minutes, a bunch of monsters get through because they have a
Yeah.
lobby in Tartarus,
Yeah.
just kind of letting them out.
Mhm.
By this point, Nico has a scepter that allows him to call up the dead,
Mhm.
right? Which is like even stronger than what he normally can do because it's not his power necessarily doing it, it's the scepter. So it's not draining him.
Right.
And the rule is that he needs to be using the scepter, but a Roman ranked officer needs to be the one that leads them. And so
Correct.
Jason immediately starts spouting out Latin, and none of them are listening to him, right? Because the crux of the problem is that Jason is no longer Roman.
He chose his Greek
He
side.
he has chosen his Greek side without realizing it, right?
Yeah.
And so Frank steps in and
Frank.
he goes and he starts leading them, right? And he tells Jason, like, you're no longer Roman, they're not recognizing you. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Right?
And
And Jason's
also,
like, all right,
Frank and Jason both recognize in that moment that what Frank needs now
is to
is that
be
rank.
higher because Frank
Not
is
all of the
only
Legionnaires
a
are listening.
centurion. Yeah.
Yes.
So he's only able to lead one of the cohorts.
Yes.
And so Jason, what's really cool to me is he falls into like a marine voice and he promotes him and he resigns and
Mhm.
he makes Frank a praetor and Frank ends up leading and doing this really, cool, great thing.
Mhm.
And
It's
as
just
this
it's just
it's
so real quick. It's just so interesting because like you watch Jason sort of become comfortable with his Greek side. At the same time, simultaneously, you watch Frank sort of become more confident with himself
with being a
and
child of
his
Mars.
and
Yeah.
with being a child of Mars, with being a Roman and all of that. And it's just like this cutesy
Yeah.
little like dichotomy between the two of them of like
Mhm.
both of them discovering, and not even just both of them, like all of these kids just discovering who they are and what they want
Well,
and
nothing teaches you who you are than being on the brink of death
no
constantly.
kidding. But it's just so interesting.
And so they do that. And what I really love, so there's multiple things that happen,
There's so
right?
much that happens. Read the book, y'all.
Read the book. One thing that I really like is a little thing we find out that Coach Hedge was the one that brought Clarice to Camp Half Blood.
Okay.
And that
Yes.
just makes so much more sense
Yes.
because he's like, yeah, she's a little loose cannon. She's kind of nutty. She's great. Love her.
Yeah.
And it makes a lot of sense when you remember how she was, especially at the beginning. Like she's
Yes.
cooled down a lot because of, Selena's demise.
Death and all of that. Yeah.
And but she was a loose cannon. Then back in Tartarus, right? We get Percy, Annabeth, Bob, and then they have Small Bob, which is the cat from the
It's when,
Smithsonian.
yeah, what's his face was planting saber
And
tooth.
yeah,
Whatever.
and so they get a cat. It's cute, right? But Bob at one point starts remembering who he is,
Mm-hmm.
right? And he and Percy have a moment
Mm-hmm.
because Percy finds out the only reason Bob showed up is not even for Percy, but because Nico had been nice to him and told him that
Right.
Percy was a good guy.
Yes.
And so he goes as like a favor to Nico. And Percy has that once again that realization of like, oh, I'm like a crap friend
Mm-hmm.
if they're not directly in front of me, right? Which is
Mm-hmm.
every ADHD realization.
Right.
And he has that moment, but it's obviously on such a higher stake for him because he feels everything so strongly. He feels like he has to be perfect all the time for
Mm-hmm.
everybody. So then they meet another Titan or a giant. It was a giant. He is meant to be the arch nemesis of Ares,
Yep.
right? Which means that he's super peaceful and he just wants to
Mm-hmm.
do his little herbs and live his little life in his garden. But his parents are like, you
Have to
suck.
kill everything and
Yeah.
everybody.
Annabeth is very desperately trying to convince him, like, hey, you need to come to the doors with us. That is what the prophecy means. And he's like, no, my fate is that every single day I need to fight this dang Draken,
Mm-hmm.
kill him every single day,
Mm-hmm.
and just live my life here. So they continue on
They
towards,
have a great interaction with Nyx.
Love Nyx.
We love
Love
Nyx.
Nyx.
Love Nyx.
Terrible here. Love Nyx.
Yes.
And I love the way that they trick Nyx because they ask the parent and teacher's feared question of who is your favorite?
Favorite, yes.
And she's like, I don't have one. And all of her kids are looking at her like,
I'm
yeah,
the favorite.
Mom. Who's your favorite?
No, I'm the favorite.
And that's how they end up sneaking through and stuff like that. Once they finally get to where the doors of death are, they realize that there's thousands and thousands of monsters here.
Monsters that most of them have been killed.
Yeah.
By one and or both of them.
Yeah, or just demigods in general. Like, things are not great. And the kicker is they have to get to the elevator, right, which are the doors of death, and whoever sends them up has to hold the button for 12 minutes.
12 minutes.
Right?
That's
and
very important.
By this point, they had basically made this promise that Bob was going to get out with them, right? Yes. They were like, Bob is our friend, stuff like that.
Correct.
They get to these doors, they're hidden by death mist, right? So none of the monsters and stuff are seeing them.
Right.
And their whole plan was they're going to cut the chains, they're going to get into the elevator, everything will be fine. Lo and behold, Tartarus himself shows up.
Because of course he does.
What was really heartbreaking for me in this scene was the fact that when he shows up and they have this conversation, Percy drops his sword. It's probably the only time we see in the entire series of Percy up to this point where he is genuinely terrified and hopeless. Like he feels as though there is nothing he can do to do this. And so he ends up dropping his sword.
Yeah.
And they're getting ready to have some sort of issue, right? And then we end up having to where the giant shows up, right? And they end up kind of realizing that they're going to like duke it out with Tartarus buying Percy and Annabeth that time, right? And Percy tells Annabeth, get in the elevator, I'll hold the button. And she's like, you're crazy. No. You're not doing that. And that was kind of his plan all along. Like, he was like, Bob and Annabeth will get through. I owe it to Bob. And he will hold the button. And he will hold the button. Bob ends up saying that he will hold the button because they both know that Bob and the giant are not going to be able to hold off or stop Tartarus, like kill him, but they'll be able to buy them some time. And Percy and Annabeth are like, well, Percy mostly, because Annabeth, being child of Athena, very quickly is like, this is the only way, but it hurts her. Percy is a lot more like, there needs to be a way that Bob can get out.
Right.
And they have a really heartbreaking story, conversation, which genuinely caused me to get teary-eyed because Bob says, like, tell the sun and the stars hello from me. Because Percy knows that if Bob stays, it's not just that he's going to be defeated, that Tartarus is going to put murdered them in his, like, armor. Yeah. Which is just made up of monsters that just like consistently get reincarnated just to be put in agony again. And so they know that he's going to die and it's not going to be something that he comes back from. And so he tells them like, hey, tell the sun and stars hello from me. And it makes me so sad because it is once again Percy feeling as though he failed somebody, right? That person realizing that they were failed by Percy, but forgiving him because they choose to still be like good and everything like that.
Right.
And so Annabeth and Percy end up going into the doors. And as they're coming up, Hazel is having a fight with a sorceress and then passive. Yes. And Cletus, which is a giant whose sole purpose there is if Pacify fails to kill whoever is left standing.
Yes.
And so Hazel does some really cool misbending stuff, like real nice. Hecate shows up and goes, like, she has been deemed worthy and I will fight this giant and with her and, you know, uses her torches and stuff. I think Hecate is a lot more like personality scary in Triple Goddess, but she's a lot more power scary in this one because we see a lot more of it happen.
Yes.
And so Hazel and Hecate end up working to fight Cletus because Hecate does a really cool thing. And Cletus is like, what can this girl do? Right? Like, whatever. And Hegasy's like, I was just making sure her friends had time to get here.
Mm-hmm.
And all at once, the rest of the 7 show up and they're all attacking him from different fronts.
Mm-hmm.
And Percy and Annabeth have made it through the doors and they're like unconscious, slowly waking up, kind of thing. And they manage to get through. And so the story really ends with Reyna meeting up with them, Reyna and Nico deciding that they are going to shadow travel to get the statue back to Camp Half-Blood. The rest of them are going to have to stay and go to Greece, go to Athens specifically to fight Gaia.
Mm-hmm.
And we find some really sad things. Reyna had to put down her Pegasus because it got injured and she needed to bring it out of its misery, which Reyna, once again, really gets dealt bad hands. And so they have this whole plan. They all are kind of just, they take a moment. They're like, we could get on the ship and just immediately leave, but we're just going to take this moment to appreciate the fact that we're alive. Right. And Percy makes me cry, not being dramatic. Genuinely made a tear fall down my face when he looks up at the sky and says, Bob says hello. Mm-hmm. And that is how the book ends. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It was a painful one for me. It was, I think House of Hades is my favorite Rick book. Not just from Heroes of Olympus, but this one I think was so...
I'm gonna fight him even more now.
I think this one was so good for me because it made me feel all of the emotions very distinctly. Yes. Like there were moments where I was really sad. There were moments where I was really angry. There were moments where I felt that unadulterated joy. I was really happy when I was rereading this book and going like, this is what a full-fledged like Greek
tragedy
story
kind of is.
Yeah,
like when you think about it, yeah. That's actually a really good point.
It was just a really good story with the media that it was choosing to replicate, and I really appreciated that.
You would.
Yeah, I just, something about it was really good. The next book that we will be reading, and the last book from the Heroes of Olympus series, will be Blood of Olympus. And I know it's going to hurt me. Mm-hmm. I think I've only read that one once or twice.
I've only read it once. This will be my second time reading it, and
that will be what we are reading in this coming week at the time that we're recording this one. Mm-hmm. But I can definitely say that this series I love more than Percy Jackson and the Olympians. Just because
it just fits
the
better.
bigger, I think it's also just like Rick really steps into his writing chops with this one. Like Percy Jackson and the Olympians was fun, but there was never a point where I was like, wow, this author is like chef's kiss.
But like the risks were kind of low when you think about it, like stakes are high in this one.
Which is crazy when we're thinking Kronos.
Because it was Kronos turning demigods against each other, but now it's like on a whole nother level.
Yeah. And so I really appreciated the series. Really looking forward to reading Blood of Olympus. Not because I think it'll be a fun ride for me.
Sweet.
Yeah.
When you think about it.
And it's also because once I finish this, it'll give us that chance to start planning when we're going to read Trials of Apollo, which I've never read.
I've read.
And it'll be the first time in more than a decade that I've read like a series by Rick that wasn't something I had already read, because I'm not counting recommendation letters. Because even if they were new books, they felt like things I've already read, from Rick.
But also like from here, it's just like you have the Kane Chronicles, which is great, which is my favorite series that Rick has written. Plus his Rick Riordan Presents publishing category at
which
Disney
is a lot
Hyperion,
of like people of color and stuff.
Which is so like the Stormrunner series, which is great.
Yeah.
I read there's several. Oh my gosh, so good.
But thank you, listeners. In order to continue the series and stuff like that, the love and response of these books have really been what's been pushing us. We appreciate each and every single one of you for being here, and we will see you in the next video.